Long ago, in a vast and flourishing empire, the Persian Empire, there lived a young Jewish girl named Esther. She was born into a modest family, but her life was marked by early tragedy. Her parents died when she was very young, leaving her an orphan. It was her cousin Mordecai, a wise and devout man, who took her in and raised her as his own daughter. Although Esther's childhood was shadowed by the loss of her parents, she grew up in the safe, loving care of Mordecai, who taught her the importance of faith, morality, and loyalty to her people. Esther lived in Susa, the capital city of the Persian Empire, where the opulence and grandeur of the royal palace contrasted sharply with the humble homes of the Jewish community. Despite being part of the Jewish minority, Esther led a relatively simple life, surrounded by the comfort of family and the warmth of her community. However, in the back of her mind, she always felt a sense of yearning, an awareness that her life, as it was not destined for the ordinary. Little did she know her future would be anything but ordinary. Don't forget to like and share with your friends. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any exciting stories, and turn on the bell to receive notifications firsthand. We want to hear your opinion. Comment below on what you think of this video and share your thoughts with us. Let's be part of this journey of faith and learning together. The Persian Empire, under King Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, was vast and powerful. Yet within its grand walls, a deep-seated unrest brewed. Queen Vashti, the reigning queen, was ousted after refusing to obey the king's orders during a lavish feast. Her defiance marked the beginning of a great change in the palace, as King Ahasuerus sought a new queen, one who would win his favor and fulfill the role left vacant. To find her, the king sent his servants throughout the empire to gather the most beautiful young women, who would then undergo a period of preparation and be presented before the king. Esther, a young and exceptionally beautiful woman, caught the attention of those sent to select candidates for the new queen. Mordecai, ever watchful, advised her to go, but to keep her Jewish identity a secret. Esther, though filled with hesitation and fear of what her future held, trusted her cousin's wisdom and agreed. Little did she know her future would be anything but ordinary. At the royal palace, Esther underwent rigorous training to prepare her for her meeting with the king. For months, she was groomed, dressed in beautiful clothing, taught the manners and customs of the palace, and taught how to win the king's favor. During this time, Esther's beauty and composure set her apart from the other women, but it was her inner strength, guided by Mordecai's teachings, that would truly prove to be her most powerful asset. Despite the lavish and seemingly glamorous life she was being introduced to, Esther never forgot her roots. She was humble, respectful, and knew the importance of maintaining her faith and identity. Although she was now living in the heart of the Persian Empire, surrounded by luxury and power, she felt like a stranger in this world. Her Jewish identity was her anchor, yet she was forced to hide it, as Mordecai had advised, for fear of drawing unwanted attention. When the time came for King Ahasuerus to choose his queen, he was struck by Esther's beauty and demeanor. More than just her outward appearance, it was Esther's kindness, grace, and sincerity that won the king's heart. She was chosen to be his queen. But this was no ordinary selection. The fate of an entire nation was now tied to the life of one young girl who had been raised in a small Jewish household in the shadow of the Persian Empire. Esther's ascent to the throne was swift and unexpected. As she entered the palace as queen, she had no idea of the immense responsibility that would soon befall her. She had not asked for power or glory. She had simply followed the guidance of her cousin and trusted in the will of God. But her journey, though marked by beauty and prestige, would soon require far more than her charm and grace. Esther was about to be called upon to fulfill a mission that would not only alter the course of her own life, but the destiny of her entire people. At the beginning of her reign, Esther had no idea that she would soon be faced with a decision that would test her courage and faith in ways she could never have anticipated. However, as her journey unfolds, Esther would rise to become one of the greatest heroes of her people, using her position of power to change the course of history and ensure the survival of the Jewish people in a land that threatened their very existence. As Esther settled into her new life as queen, the magnificence of the Persian royal palace began to feel more like a gilded cage. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the air was always thick with the scent of exotic perfumes. Yet despite the luxury and prestige, Esther could not shake the feeling of unease. She had always lived simply, surrounded by her people, but now she was isolated in a palace full of strangers, each with their own motives and ambitions. Esther's life at the palace was an intricate web of etiquette, politics, and opulence. Every word she spoke and every gesture she made were scrutinized. There were those who welcomed her with open arms, drawn by her beauty and grace, while others eyed her with jealousy and suspicion. As queen, she had the power to influence decisions, but in a palace where intrigue ran deep and power was often wrestled away from those who appeared weak, Esther felt the weight of her new position keenly. King Ahasuero, though kind to her, was often distant and preoccupied with the politics of his empire. While he trusted Esther in matters of state, he had a busy schedule and was often distracted by the needs of his court and his military campaigns. She rarely saw him outside of formal events, and their interactions, though cordial, lacked the intimacy of a genuine relationship. Esther's role as queen was ceremonial, yet the burden of leadership was beginning to weigh heavily on her. Meanwhile, Mordecai, still living in the city of Susa, kept a careful watch over his beloved cousin. His advice had guided her to the throne, but now he worried about the political dynamics unfolding in the palace. He knew that the royal court was not merely a place of luxury, but also one of danger. Among the courtiers, there were those who would do anything to increase their own power. One such person was Haman, the king's highest official, whose influence was growing by the day. Haman, a man of immense ambition, was the king's closest advisor. His rise to power was swift, but his arrogance was even swifter. With his prideful nature and obsessive hunger for recognition, Haman sought to dominate every aspect of the court. He expected all to bow before him, and anyone who dared defy him was quickly disposed of. Mordecai, ever steadfast in his faith, refused to bow before Haman, a gesture that was deeply insulting to the official. To Mordecai, bowing to anyone but God was unthinkable, and he saw no reason to give in to Haman's prideful demands. This small act of defiance would have grave consequences. When Haman learned that Mordecai refused to bow, his fury knew no bounds. His anger grew into hatred, and he began plotting a terrible revenge against Mordecai. However, in his bitterness, Haman's vendetta did not stop with Mordecai alone. He decided that all Jews must pay for the insult. Thus, Haman devised a plan to annihilate the entire Jewish population in the Persian Empire. Haman went before King Ahasuero, presenting him with a proposal to destroy the Jews. He spun a narrative, claiming that the Jews were a disobedient and dissident people who did not follow the king's laws and customs. His plan was for the king to issue an edict that would allow the Jews to be slaughtered on a specific day. To sweeten the deal, Haman promised the king a vast sum of silver, which he would pay from his own treasury. Ahasuero, unknowing of the full extent of Haman's motivations, trusted his advisor and agreed to the decree. A royal edict was issued throughout the empire, setting the date for the massacre of all Jews. The decree was sealed with the king's signet ring, making it unalterable. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he was devastated. He immediately sent word to Esther, urging her to go before the king and plead for the lives of their people. However, Esther knew the risks. According to the laws of the kingdom, no one could approach the king without being summoned. If she did so uninvited, it could mean her death. Esther found herself trapped in a terrible dilemma. She had the power of the throne, but using that power to defy the king's decree meant risking her life. Yet Mordecai's message left her no other choice. He reminded her that perhaps she had been placed in the position of queen for such a time as this. This was no longer just a matter of political intrigue. It was a matter of life and death for her people. For days, Esther wrestled with the decision. Should she risk everything for a people she had yet to fully know? Should she challenge the very king who had chosen her as queen? The weight of the situation bore down on her, but eventually Esther made her decision. With courage and faith, she would approach the king. She would risk everything to save her people. And so, Esther prepared for what would become the defining moment of her life. The fate of the Jewish people and her own future rested on a single act of bravery. Esther knew that to approach the king without being summoned was to risk her life. The laws of the Persian court were absolute. No one, not even the queen, could enter the king's presence uninvited without facing severe consequences. However, as she reflected on Mordecai's words and the fate of her people, she realized there was no other option. The Jews were doomed unless she acted, and she had been placed in this position for a purpose far greater than herself. For 3 days, Esther fasted and prayed, seeking guidance and strength. She called on all the Jews in the city of Susa to join her in prayer and fasting. Together, they prayed for divine intervention, for strength to face what was ahead, and for courage to stand up to the king. Esther's heart was heavy with the enormity of what she was about to do, but her resolve was firm. This was a moment that would define her not just as a queen, but as a leader of her people. When the 3 days of fasting and prayer were over, Esther dressed in her royal robes, preparing herself for the most important moment of her life. She adorned herself in a simple yet elegant gown, her face calm but determined. She knew that the decision she was about to make could either save or doom the entire Jewish population of the Persian Empire. But she also knew that in that moment, she was not just a queen of Persia, she was a representative of her people and their hope for survival. With steady hands, Esther approached the inner court of the palace, where the king would receive his visitors. As she crossed the threshold into the court, the silence in the room was deafening. All eyes were on her. The king, sitting on his throne, looked up and saw her standing there. The tension in the air was palpable. She had entered uninvited. The fate of the queen now lay in the hands of the king. King Ahasuero, surprised by her sudden appearance, stood up from his throne and extended the golden scepter toward her, an ancient gesture of mercy and favor. Esther, knowing that she had been granted the king's permission to speak, approached cautiously and touched the tip of the scepter, signaling her submission to the king. The room, which had been filled with a tense silence, seemed to relax slightly. The king, with a gentle smile, addressed her. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? I will give you anything, even up to half of my kingdom." His tone was kind, but there was a hint of curiosity. Esther's heart raced. She had been granted the opportunity to speak, but how should she begin? With all the courage she could muster, Esther responded, "If it pleases the king, let him and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for them." It was a bold request, but Esther knew she needed to begin carefully. She did not yet reveal her true purpose, as she understood the importance of timing and patience. She had a plan, and this banquet would be the first step in revealing it. The king, intrigued and pleased by her invitation, readily agreed.
"Bring Haman at once," he said, and so it was done. Haman, ever confident in his rise to power, eagerly accepted the invitation, unaware of the gravity of what was about to unfold. At the banquet, the atmosphere was much lighter than it had been in the royal court. Wine flowed freely, and the food was sumptuous, but Esther remained calm and composed, all the while carefully observing the interactions between the king and Haman. She knew this was only the beginning of her delicate plan, and that the right moment had not yet arrived. As the meal drew to a close, King Ahasuero again turned to Esther with a generous offer. "Now tell me, Queen Esther, what is your request? It shall be granted to you, even up to half of my kingdom." Esther's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that the moment she had been preparing for had finally come. She could no longer delay, but she also knew she had to reveal the truth with careful precision. She had been chosen for this moment, and she had the power to change the fate of her people. Taking a deep breath, Esther replied, "If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be spared, and the life of my people. For we have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I would have kept silent. But the enemy intends to destroy us." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. The king's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. In that tense moment, Esther finally revealed the truth. "The enemy who is trying to destroy my people is none other than this wicked Haman." The king's face turned dark with fury as the truth was revealed. His once favored advisor, Haman, was the architect of this vile plan. The room seemed to spin as Ahasuero processed the shock of Esther's revelation. He had been unaware that Haman, whom he had trusted so deeply, was behind such an atrocious scheme. Anger and betrayal flashed in his eyes as he stood abruptly from his throne. He turned to Haman, who was visibly sweating, realizing the magnitude of the situation. "Is this true, Haman?" the king demanded. Haman, now realizing that his fate had been sealed, fell to the floor, pleading for his life before the queen. "Please, Queen Esther, I beg you, spare me!" he cried, but his pleading was drowned out by the king's voice, which thundered in fury. "You dare to plot against the queen and her people? You will pay for this betrayal." The king, still disturbed by the events that had unfolded, agreed to Esther. Haman was immediately arrested, and the king's soldiers took him away. The justice that Esther had worked so hard to bring about was now unfolding before her eyes. The tables had turned, and the threat that had hung over her people was now being dealt with swiftly. Esther, though relieved by the swift justice, knew that the battle was not yet over. The king's decree for the destruction of the Jews still stood, and her next task would be to ensure their safety once and for all. But for now, she had taken the first step. Her courage had prevailed, and the fate of her people had been forever changed. The seeds of hope had been planted, and Esther had shown the world that, in the face of impossible odds, one person's bravery could change the course of history. The revelation of Haman's plot sent shockwaves throughout the palace. The king, now fully aware of the treachery that had been unfolding right under his nose, was quick to act. Haman, once the most powerful man in the empire next to the king, was stripped of his position, and his fate was sealed. However, while this immediate victory brought a sense of justice, it did not erase the reality that the original decree, calling for the destruction of all Jews in the empire, was still in place. Esther, though relieved by the downfall of Haman, knew that her work was far from over. The king's decree was irrevocable. Once sealed with the royal signet ring, it could not be undone. Even with Haman's removal, the death sentence that had been pronounced on the Jewish people still hung over them like a dark cloud. Esther realized that in order to truly protect her people, She had to act quickly and decisively. After Haman's execution, the king turned to Esther. He offered her anything she wished, even half of the kingdom, as a sign of his gratitude for exposing the treasonous plot. Esther, however, had a different request. "Let a new decree be issued," she said to the king. "Let the Jews be allowed to defend themselves on the day that has been set for their destruction. Let them be given the right to fight back and protect their lives."
He understood that the original decree could not be undone, but he was willing to allow the Jews to defend themselves. He gave Esther and Mordecai full authority to issue a new edict that would grant the Jewish people the right to arm themselves and fight back against their enemies. Mordecai, who had been elevated to a position of great influence after Haman's downfall, wasted no time. He quickly set about drafting the new decree, which would be sent to all corners of the Persian Empire. In every province, Jews were now allowed to gather arms, form militias, and fight against anyone who would try to harm them. The king's signet ring was again used to seal the decree, and it was sent out to all the satraps, governors of the provinces. As the news of the new decree spread, hope began to rise among the Jewish people. Though they still faced great danger, they now had the legal right to fight back. This decree did more than just give them permission to defend themselves. It gave them a sense of empowerment. They were no longer passive victims awaiting a grim fate. Instead, they had the means to protect themselves, to take control of their own destinies. In the days that followed, Esther and Mordecai worked tirelessly to prepare the Jews for the coming battle. They sent messages to Jewish communities across the empire, urging them to be vigilant and to organize their defenses. The Jewish people, once filled with fear, now rallied together in solidarity. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their dignity, their faith, and the courage of their queen and Mordecai behind them. The news of the new decree reached all the corners of the empire, and the Jewish communities were filled with both fear and resolve. The day that had been set for their destruction, the 13th of Adar, was fast approaching. But now, instead of trembling in fear, the Jews stood united. They were ready to defend themselves, to fight for their right to live in peace and security. On the eve of the 13th of Adar, the tension was palpable. In every city, in every province, Jews were gathering in their homes and preparing for the battle that would determine their fate. They knew that the fight ahead would be difficult, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had the strength of their people, their faith, and the courage of their queen and Mordecai behind them. When the fateful day arrived, the Jews, armed and prepared, stood firm. They fought back against the forces that sought to destroy them, and to their amazement, they were victorious. The enemies who had been intent on their destruction were struck down, and the Jews emerged victorious in battle. The day that had once been filled with terror was now one of celebration. In every city, Jewish communities gathered to thank God for their survival. Esther and Mordecai were hailed as heroes, not just for exposing Haman's plot, but for their courage, their wisdom, and their unwavering commitment to the Jewish people. They had turned a moment of darkness into one of light, and their bravery had changed the fate of an entire nation. As the celebrations of Purim began, Esther's legacy as a queen who saved her people became immortalized. But even as they rejoiced, the Jews knew that their victory was not just a military one. It was a victory of faith, of unity, and of the power of one person's courage to change the course of history. And so, the Jews of Persia were saved, not through fate alone,
but through the bravery and determination of a queen who risked everything to protect those she loved. Esther's story would be told for generations to come, a testament to the power of courage and faith in the face of overwhelming odds. After the Jews' stunning victory over their enemies, the empire was shaken by the events that had unfolded. What was once a terrifying decree of annihilation had been reversed, and now the Jewish people were celebrating their miraculous survival. The day that had been meant for their destruction, the 13th of Adar, had transformed into a day of triumph. A day when Esther's courage, Mordecai's wisdom, and the united strength of the Jewish people had turned the tide in their favor. The new decree allowed the Jews to defend themselves and to strike down those who sought to harm them. And they did. The 13th of Adar was no longer a day of doom, but one of battle and survival. As the news spread of the Jews' victory, celebrations erupted throughout the empire. The Jews were victorious, not just in battle, but in restoring their dignity, their faith, and their hope for the future. On the 14th of Adar, the Jewish communities across the empire gathered together in joyous celebration. It became a day of feasting, giving, and giving thanks to God for delivering them from their enemies. This celebration, which would later become known as Purim, marked not just a military victory, but also a spiritual one. It was a day of renewal, where the Jews came together to remember their shared history, their survival, and the divine protection they had experienced. Purim became a time for families to come together, for friends to share meals, and for gifts to be exchanged. The Jews of Persia celebrated with songs, dances, and prayers of gratitude. They recited the story of Esther, remembering how she had risked her life to save them, how Mordecai had been their steadfast guide, and how the power of God had worked through them to bring about this miraculous turnaround.
For Esther, this celebration was both a moment of triumph and reflection. She had not sought glory or recognition, but she could not help but feel deeply moved by the outpouring of love and gratitude from her people. She had acted out of a sense of duty, a duty to protect her people, but the full weight of what she had done was not fully realized until she saw the joy and unity of the Jews around her. The people hailed Esther as a heroine, but she remained humble. She had acted in obedience to her faith and to the counsel of Mordecai, and she knew that her actions were part of a larger divine plan. She did not seek to elevate herself above her people, but rather she rejoiced in their salvation. The real victory for Esther was not the destruction of their enemies, but the restoration of her people's hope and unity. Mordecai, too, was celebrated for his role in the Jews' survival. His wisdom and guidance had been instrumental in bringing about the change that had saved them. Together with Esther, he helped lead the Jewish people through the darkest of times, and now they stood united, stronger than ever before. As the years passed, Purim became an annual observance for Jews everywhere, a time to celebrate their survival and to reflect on the power of faith and action. The story of Esther was read aloud every year, reminding each generation of the courage of the queen who had saved her people and the strength of the community that had come together to fight for their survival. But Purim was not only about celebration, it was also about generosity and giving. One of the key traditions of Purim was the giving of gifts to the poor and to friends, a symbol of the solidarity and unity that had carried the Jews through their darkest days. The exchange of gifts and the giving of charity became a central part of the festival, reminding all that true victory comes not only from triumph over one's enemies, but from the strength of community and compassion for others.
The legacy of Esther, as queen and savior of her people, endured long after her death. She became an enduring symbol of courage, faith, and sacrifice. Her story was passed down through generations, not only as a reminder of a great victory, but as a source of inspiration for those who faced their own battles. Esther's example showed that one person, when guided by faith and courage, could change the fate of an entire people. Even in the modern world, Esther's story continues to inspire. Women and men alike look to her as a model of strength, wisdom, and leadership. In times of crisis, her example teaches that no matter how difficult the path, standing up for what is right can bring about profound change. Esther's courage to act when all seemed lost is a beacon for those who are oppressed and persecuted, and her legacy lives on in the fight for justice, equality, and human rights.
Purim remains a celebration of that courage, a day when the world remembers the Jewish people's survival and the enduring strength of Esther, the queen who risked everything to save her people. Through her bravery, Esther became a timeless symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance for redemption. With the defeat of Haman and the issuance of the new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves, the immediate danger had passed. However, the work was far from over. While the Jewish people had survived the threat of annihilation, the repercussions of the decree still loomed large. The enemies of the Jews had been defeated, but there was still the question of how to ensure their protection moving forward, and how to deal with the aftermath of such an upheaval. In the aftermath of the victory, Esther and Mordecai worked tirelessly to help rebuild the confidence of the Jewish people and strengthen their position within the empire. With the decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves, many of the Jewish communities across Persia began to organize for the protection of their families and homes. But there was also an urgent need to make sure that the right measures were in place to ensure their long-term safety. Esther, ever the astute queen, began using her influence to ensure that the empire's leaders would honor the new decree and that no further threats to the Jews would arise. Mordecai, whose rise to power had been swift, became one of the most trusted officials in the kingdom. His position allowed him to work closely with Esther to ensure that their people would not only survive, but thrive in the wake of their victory. Despite the turmoil, the kingdom's political landscape began to stabilize. As Esther and Mordecai worked within the court, their influence spread beyond just the Jewish community. They were no longer just survivors of a plot, they were now respected leaders in the Persian Empire. Their position, however, was not without its challenges. There were those who still resented the power shift, particularly the supporters of Haman, who were now forced to confront the consequences of their allegiances. Even in the midst of their newfound power, Esther and Mordecai did not forget the trials their people had endured. They worked to establish stronger protections for the Jewish people, ensuring that no such decree could ever be made again. Mordecai particularly became a powerful voice in the court, advocating for the rights of minorities and those oppressed within the empire. He worked closely with Esther, and together they implemented policies that sought to protect the Jewish community, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Esther, for her part, continued to lead with wisdom and grace, never losing sight of the people she was sworn to protect. Her influence at court was undeniable, but it was her compassion and her unwavering sense of justice that truly set her apart. She had not sought power for personal gain, but rather as a means of ensuring the survival and well-being of her people. Now, as queen, she used her position to make lasting change, not just for the Jews, but for the entire empire. As the years went on, Purim became an ever more significant celebration for the Jewish people. What had started as a day of salvation turned into an annual reminder of the power of faith,
courage, and unity. The story of Esther, the brave queen who had saved her people, was passed down from generation to generation, not just as a tale of a historical event, but as a reminder of the strength that lay within the Jewish community and within each individual.
The festival of Purim became a time of joy, but also of reflection and gratitude. It was a time to remember the darkness of the past, but also the light of redemption and the power of action. Esther's story served as a beacon of hope, not only for the Jewish people, but for all those who faced oppression and injustice. Her legacy was not only in the survival of the Jewish community, but also in the way her courage and faith had reshaped the future. Even though Esther's reign as queen would eventually come to an end, her impact lived on long after her death. Her actions and decisions had set the stage for the Jews to not only survive, but to thrive in the Persian Empire. And the story of Esther's courage, of how one woman's actions saved an entire people, continued to inspire countless generations. Through her sacrifice and dedication, Esther had proven that even in the most dangerous and uncertain of times, there is always room for hope, for change, and for victory. Her legacy remains a testament to the power of one individual's courage to transform history. With the final defeat of Haman and the success of the new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves, the empire began to shift from a time of fear to one of hope and renewal. The Jewish people, once on the brink of annihilation, now found themselves not only surviving, but flourishing. But while the victory was an undeniable triumph, Esther and Mordecai understood that their people's safety and future depended on much more than the immediate battle. The aftermath of the decree and the Jews' survival was a time for reflection and for rebuilding. Esther and Mordecai, having navigated the complex world of Persian politics, turned their attention to ensuring the lasting protection of their community. They understood that the survival of the Jewish people didn't solely rely on military victories or royal decrees. It relied on unity, faith, and the continual vigilance of their leaders. In the years following their victory, Esther continued to work diligently at the royal court, ensuring that the Jewish people were integrated into Persian society in a way that would provide both safety and respect. She used her influence to push for fair treatment for Jews throughout the empire, advocating for their rights and positioning them as valued members of the empire's vast expanse. Esther's leadership became a model for those who understood that true power was not only about dominating an empire, but also about building a foundation where every person, no matter their background, could thrive.
Mordecai, now firmly established as a trusted advisor in the royal court, worked closely with Esther to help guide the Jewish community into this new chapter. He advocated for policies that would ensure the Jews' future in Persia, ensuring they were not just survivors of a past crisis, but were empowered to live with dignity. His role was not only political, but spiritual. He was a beacon of hope for the Jewish people, ensuring that they would never again be caught unprepared. As Purim became an established tradition, it not only commemorated the physical survival of the Jewish people, but also honored the strength of their spirit. The holiday evolved into a time of celebration but also of introspection, reminding the Jewish people of the dangers they had faced and the courage it had taken to overcome them. Esther, through her bravery, had shown them that even in the darkest times, they could rely on each other, on their faith, and on their determination to rise above adversity. But Esther's influence went beyond the borders of the Persian Empire. The story of her courage and selflessness spread far and wide, and her example inspired people across the ancient world. Throughout history, her name has been invoked in times of crisis, when one person's actions could turn the tide against injustice. Esther became a symbol of leadership that transcended the royal courts. She was a beacon of hope for anyone fighting oppression, injustice, and tyranny. Her legacy also lived on through the generations of women who found in her an example of strength and resilience. Esther was a queen who did not sit idly by in the comfort of her palace, but instead risked everything to protect her people. She became a symbol of women's empowerment in a time when women were often confined to passive roles, showing that leadership and courage could come from anyone, regardless of their gender. As the centuries passed, Esther's story continued to be told and retold. Her name became synonymous with bravery, faith, and the ability to rise against overwhelming odds. Her legacy was immortalized not just in the religious observances of Purim, but in the hearts of all those who admired the courage of a woman who saved a people by defying the odds. Today, Esther's legacy is celebrated in many ways, through the observance of Purim, the retelling of her story in books and films, and through the continued work of leaders who draw strength from her example. Her story reminds us all that no matter how difficult the journey may seem, there is always a path forward for those who are willing to act with courage, wisdom, and compassion. And so, the Jewish people, their faith strengthened by Esther's actions, continued to thrive in the Persian Empire and beyond. The story of Esther, the queen who saved her people, became a timeless symbol of hope and endurance. Through her bravery, Esther had shown that one person could make a difference, and in doing so, she inspired generations to come.
As the years passed, the victory of the Jewish people over their enemies continued to resonate throughout the Persian Empire and beyond. The events of Purim and the bravery of Queen Esther became a story that transcended time, echoing in the hearts of not only the Jewish community, but also in the broader world, where it served as an inspiration for those facing oppression, injustice, and tyranny. Esther's reign as queen was not defined solely by the political events of her time. She had become a beacon of hope, a living testament to the power of courage and faith in the face of overwhelming odds. Her actions, though deeply rooted in the preservation of her people, reached far beyond the boundaries of Persia, touching the lives of countless individuals and nations. Throughout the centuries, Esther's story spread, first among the Jewish people and later across cultures and regions. Her triumph was celebrated not only as the victory of a woman, but as a victory for the oppressed and marginalized in society. In times of struggle and strife, Esther's name became synonymous with the idea that even one individual, when guided by moral conviction and unshakable faith, could bring about monumental change. In the Jewish world, Purim became an annual occasion not only to remember their deliverance from destruction, but to reflect on the strength of their identity and unity. As the holiday spread across the Jewish diaspora, Esther became a symbol of resilience, an embodiment of the collective strength that could arise from faith and community. But Esther's influence extended far beyond the Jewish people. Her legacy also became an important touchstone for women throughout history, who were fighting to be heard, seen, and respected in societies where their voices were often suppressed. Esther was a figure who demonstrated that women, though frequently relegated to secondary roles, had the power to change the course of history. She was not merely a queen by birthright, but a leader through her courage, wisdom, and self-sacrifice. She inspired countless women throughout the ages to step into leadership roles, to use their voices, and to stand for what was right, even in the face of overwhelming opposition.
In the centuries that followed, Esther's story became a core part of the struggle for women's rights, especially during times of political upheaval and social injustice. Her role as a woman who rose from humble beginnings to the highest echelons of power provided a model of hope for women in every society, in every era. Her story also resonated deeply with those in the larger world who fought against authoritarian regimes and injustices of all kinds. Esther's courage in confronting an oppressive regime where she risked her life for the greater good was celebrated as a universal symbol of resistance. Her story reminded people everywhere that resistance was not only possible, but essential when faced with tyranny and oppression.
As the modern world continued to change, the legacy of Esther was continually revisited by new generations. Her story was retold in books, films, plays, and other forms of media, each retelling making her character even more timeless and relevant. Her legacy was woven into the fabric of global movements for social justice, equality, and human rights. Esther's example of leadership, courage, and devotion to her people stood as a call to action for all those who sought a better world. Her impact was felt not just in the abstract concept of bravery, but in tangible acts of resistance and change. Esther's bravery was a living testament to the power of one person to effect change, regardless of gender, status, or background. She taught the world that to fight for what is right, sometimes one must risk everything, and in doing so, open the door to a new future. Through Purim, Esther's legacy was celebrated every year, but her true influence was felt in the lives of those who found the strength to fight for justice, whether in the courts, in the streets, or in the halls of power. Her story lived on in the hearts of those who were oppressed, those who felt voiceless, and those who were ready to rise and take action for a better future. Esther's legacy endured through all generations, offering a shining example of what it means to stand for what is right, no matter the consequences. It was a legacy of courage, faith, and love for her people, and a reminder that no matter how small we may feel in the face of overwhelming odds, each person has the power to make a difference. As long as there are struggles for justice and equality, as long as people face oppression and persecution, Esther's legacy will continue to shine brightly. She was more than just a queen. She was a leader, a symbol, and a reminder that one person, no matter who they are, can change the world. Esther's story, which began in the opulent courts of Persia, transcended time and geography, becoming a universal symbol of courage, resilience, and justice. Though centuries have passed since her courageous actions saved her people, her legacy continues to resonate deeply across cultures and generations. Esther became not only a heroine in her own right, but an enduring symbol of leadership that inspires people from all walks of life, regardless of their backgrounds. In the Jewish community, Esther's impact remains strong, especially as the story of Purim continued to be celebrated annually. Purim became more than just a celebration of a military victory. It became a powerful reminder of the importance of standing together in times of crisis, the value of unity, and the belief that no matter how dire the circumstances, hope and survival are always possible. Esther's courage to act when others might have been paralyzed by fear has been central to the narrative that shaped Jewish identity for centuries.
Her story, retold every year, became a focal point for each new generation. Families gathered to recount how Queen Esther, a young Jewish woman, rose from humble beginnings to become the queen of the Persian Empire, using her position of power to save her people from certain destruction. The telling of her story became not just a ritual, but a living, breathing tradition, a call to action for those who would stand against injustice and oppression, just as Esther had done. As the years passed, Purim evolved into a celebration not only of victory, but also of selflessness, love for one's community, and courage in the face of danger. Jews around the world would dress up as characters from the story, sharing the narrative with their children and communities, ensuring that Esther's legacy was passed down through the ages. Esther became a symbol of Jewish survival, resilience, and the triumph of faith. Beyond the Jewish community, however, Esther's influence spread widely, particularly in the modern era. As the world witnessed the rise of powerful women in leadership roles and movements for gender equality, Esther's example became one of the foundational stories that illustrated the capacity of women to change the course of history. Her courage in speaking out for her people, even when it meant risking her life, positioned her as an early example of female empowerment in a world that had long undervalued women's contributions. Throughout history, Esther's story was invoked by women's rights movements and advocates for gender equality. Her rise from a modest background to the highest echelons of power showed that women, regardless of their circumstances, had the potential to shape the world around them. Esther's role as queen was not about maintaining luxury or power for its own sake, but about using her position to make a meaningful difference. She didn't simply stand by. She took action when it was needed most, advocating for justice and the well-being of her people. Esther's story also resonated with other marginalized groups around the world. In times of social, racial, or political unrest, Esther's actions were a reminder that standing up against systemic injustice was not only possible, but necessary. Her courage became a beacon for anyone oppressed by a corrupt system, whether it be under the rule of tyrannical governments, colonial empires, or other forms of exploitation. Esther showed that even in the darkest times, one person could stand against overwhelming odds and effect change.
In the broader world of politics and human rights, Esther became an archetype of moral leadership. Her ability to confront the most powerful people of her time with humility, wisdom, and unyielding courage became an inspiration for political leaders and activists alike. Esther was not motivated by personal gain, but by her commitment to doing what was right for her people and for justice. Her legacy was built on selflessness and the belief that leadership was about service to others, not self-promotion. In addition to political and social movements, Esther's legacy found its way into the arts and culture. She was portrayed in literature, theater, and film as a symbol of strength, courage, and moral conviction. Her story has been adapted and retold in countless forms, each emphasizing different aspects of her character, whether it be her bravery, her wisdom, or her devotion to her people. Her legacy became more than just a historical narrative. It became a timeless allegory for anyone standing up against injustice and oppression. Moreover, Esther's legacy is present in the educational systems around the world. She has been the subject of academic study, from religious texts to modern interpretations of leadership and justice. Her story is used in schools and universities as an example of how individuals, regardless of their social standing, can make a significant impact on the world around them. Esther's courage continues to inspire leaders, scholars, and activists who believe in the power of moral leadership and standing for what is right. In modern society, Esther continues to serve as a guiding light, particularly for women and minorities. Her life and actions have been used as a model in various movements, including women's rights, the fight for racial equality, and the battle for the oppressed around the globe. Esther's example teaches us that even in the most trying circumstances, we all have the capacity for courage and the potential to make a profound difference in the world. Thus, the legacy of Esther endures, not only as a queen who saved her people, but as a symbol of enduring strength, leadership, and compassion that transcends time,
culture, and borders. Her story is as relevant today as it was centuries ago, a constant reminder that one person can change the world, and that even in the darkest of times, there is always a way to rise up, stand firm, and bring light to those in need. As the centuries passed, the impact of Esther's story continued to grow, reaching far beyond the borders of ancient Persia. While Purim remained a central celebration for the Jewish people, Esther's legacy transcended religious and cultural boundaries, becoming a symbol of courage, hope, and resistance for people around the world. Her story was no longer confined to the pages of the Bible, but had woven itself into the very fabric of global movements for justice, equality, and human rights.
In the modern era, Esther's actions were invoked by leaders and activists striving to overcome oppression, injustice, and discrimination. Her bravery, her refusal to bow to tyranny, and her selfless dedication to the survival of her people made her an enduring model of leadership. She became a figure whose story was embraced by individuals and groups fighting for a better world, reminding them that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, one person's courage could change the course of history. Esther's story also found a home in the feminist movements of the 20th and 21st centuries. She became a symbol of female empowerment, especially in societies where women have historically been marginalized and silenced. Esther was a woman who defied the expectations of her time, not through violence or rebellion, but through the quiet yet undeniable force of her courage and intelligence. She was a woman who rose to power not through birthright alone, but by using her position to advocate for justice, to protect the vulnerable, and to make a real difference in the world. In this way, Esther's legacy became a rallying cry for women everywhere who were striving to break through the barriers of patriarchy, sexism, and inequality. She showed that a woman could wield immense power, not because of her beauty, but because of her moral compass and her willingness to take risks for the sake of what was right. Esther's bravery in standing before a king, uninvited and risking her life for the sake of her people, became an iconic example of how women could challenge unjust power structures and change the world. In addition to inspiring women, Esther's story also resonated with other marginalized and oppressed groups. Her willingness to act in the face of great risk served as a reminder that even those who are oppressed and powerless have the ability to stand up and fight for their rights. Whether in times of political turmoil, civil rights movements, or struggles for racial equality, Esther's courage has been invoked by those who seek to challenge the forces of injustice and oppression. In the realm of social justice, Esther's story became a powerful example of how leadership rooted in integrity and compassion can change the course of history. Her actions were not driven by personal ambition, but by a deep sense of responsibility to her people, and her courage in standing up to an unjust system inspired countless others to take action in their own struggles for justice. The story of Esther also found its way into the arts, as filmmakers, writers, and artists sought to portray her as a figure of profound strength and resilience. Her character was featured in books, plays, movies, and other forms of media, each version of her story emphasizing different aspects of her courage, wisdom, and moral clarity. In many modern interpretations, Esther became not just a queen, but a symbol of the collective power of the marginalized. She became a timeless figure whose impact was not just a historical event, but a call to action for people everywhere to stand up for what is right. Esther's legacy also continued to shape the political landscape.
Her story was cited by politicians and activists as a guiding example of moral leadership and the courage to confront injustice, even when it meant going against powerful forces. Esther's rise from an orphaned Jewish girl to a queen who saved her people became an allegory for how individuals, regardless of their social standing or origins, could rise to positions of influence and enact profound change. In every society, from the ancient to the modern world, Esther's name became synonymous with the courage to defy the odds and fight for justice. Her story inspired revolutions and movements that sought to overturn systems of oppression and bring justice to those who had long been silenced. From the civil rights movement in the United States to the feminist movements around the globe, Esther was invoked as an example of how a single individual's bravery could spark change on a global scale. Esther's influence reached beyond the political and social spheres. It also had a deep impact on spiritual teachings. In religious communities, she became a symbol of divine intervention and of the importance of having faith in God's plan, even in the darkest times. Esther's story was a reminder that even when human efforts seem small or insignificant, God works through those who are willing to stand up for justice. Her story also taught the value of humility and the importance of using one's position of power to help others. Today, the name Esther is revered not only by Jews, but by people from all walks of life who see in her story a reflection of their own struggles and triumphs. Her life serves as a reminder that no matter the circumstances, courage, faith, and selflessness can overcome even the most insurmountable obstacles. As long as there are battles for justice and equality, Esther's legacy will continue to inspire those who are fighting for a better world. Esther's impact is timeless. Her legacy is not confined to the past, but continues to live on in every act of courage, every stand against injustice, and every effort to bring about a more just and equal world. The queen who saved her people now stands as a symbol for all those who seek to make a difference in the world, showing that no matter who you are or where you come from, you have the power to change history. As time marched on, Esther's legacy not only endured but grew in significance, becoming more relevant with each passing era. Her story, which had once been the foundation of a celebration for the Jewish people, gradually spread across cultures, inspiring countless individuals and movements dedicated to justice, freedom, and equality. Esther's actions were no longer merely a historical account. They had become an eternal symbol of what one individual could do to fight oppression and tyranny. In the modern world, Esther's story continues to resonate with people facing struggles in both personal and political arenas. Her courage, her unwavering commitment to her people, and her willingness to risk everything for a cause greater than herself serve as a touchstone for those fighting for justice today. From civil rights movements to campaigns for gender equality and freedom, Esther's name has been invoked time and again as a reminder that one person's courage can alter the course of history.
In particular, Esther's legacy has become a beacon for women around the world. Her rise from an orphaned Jewish girl to the queen who saved her people shattered the boundaries of what was traditionally expected of women in ancient societies. She did not become a queen by passive inheritance, but through her extraordinary courage, wisdom, and action. Esther's example showed that women, no matter their background, could step into positions of power, defy societal norms, and change the world for the better. As the feminist movement grew in the 20th century and beyond, Esther's story was used to illustrate the importance of women asserting their rights and using their voices. She was celebrated as a model of feminine leadership, showing that women were not only capable of ruling and leading, but also of doing so with compassion, justice, and integrity.
Her story resonated deeply with women who were working to dismantle the oppressive structures that had long limited their rights and opportunities. Esther's impact was not confined to the fight for women's rights, however. Her legacy also lived on in the struggle for racial justice and the fight against discrimination. Her story became a symbol of the marginalized standing up against the powerful, of the oppressed rising to reclaim their dignity. Esther's courage in confronting the king and demanding justice for her people became a powerful reminder that one voice, when driven by a strong sense of justice, could stand against the most powerful forces. In times of global political unrest, Esther's name has been invoked by those who fight against authoritarian regimes, by those who challenge corruption and abuse of power. Her story has been quoted by revolutionaries and activists who understand the importance of standing firm in the face of tyranny. She showed that even in the most hopeless of circumstances, there is always room for resistance, and even the most entrenched systems can be shaken by a determined few. Esther's legacy has also continued to thrive in the realm of education. She is studied in schools around the world as a prime example of moral courage and leadership. Her actions serve as a lesson in ethics, in the importance of standing up for what is right, and in the profound impact that one individual can have on the course of history. Esther's story is used to inspire young people to take action, to fight for their rights, and to never shy away from standing up for justice, no matter the cost.
In the arts, Esther's influence continues to be felt as well. Her story has been retold countless times in plays, films, books, and operas. She is depicted as the epitome of bravery, wisdom, and resilience. Her character transcends time and culture, representing the universal struggle against injustice. Esther's tale is continually adapted to modern settings, with her courage becoming a model for people facing oppression in any form, from political and social inequality to gender-based violence and beyond. In a world where injustices still abound, Esther's story serves as both a reminder and a call to action. Her ability to influence the course of history with one decisive act, her strength in the face of overwhelming odds, and her faith in the power of doing what is right are qualities that continue to inspire people everywhere. Esther teaches us that no matter our status, gender, or background, we all have the potential to bring about meaningful change. And in a world where many still struggle for their basic rights, Esther's story provides hope that resistance can indeed lead to victory. As Purim continues to be celebrated by Jewish communities around the world, Esther's legacy remains strong. The holiday serves not just as a commemoration of a past victory, but as a celebration of the enduring spirit of courage and justice that Esther embodied. Every year as the Megillah, Book of Esther, is read aloud, her story is passed down and new generations are inspired by her bravery. In the grand narrative of history, Esther is not just a figure of the past. She is a living example of what it means to stand firm in the face of adversity, to act with integrity, and to fight for the greater good. As long as there are those who struggle against oppression, Esther's legacy will continue to inspire, to guide, and to remind us that one person's actions can indeed change the course of history.
As the years continued to unfold, Esther's legacy solidified into something far greater than the events she had lived through. The story of a young Jewish orphan who rose to become the queen of Persia and saved her people became an enduring symbol, transcending generations, cultures, and religious boundaries. Esther's courage, wisdom, and faith were not only remembered within her own time, but became a source of inspiration that would ripple through history, touching lives and hearts across the globe. In the centuries that followed, Esther's name became synonymous with bravery. Her story was not just about a woman who saved her people from destruction. It was about standing up against injustice, regardless of the consequences. Esther had risked everything, her position, her safety, and her very life for the greater good. In doing so, she became a figure who transcended the traditional boundaries of leadership, showing the world that courage and righteousness could be powerful weapons against the most oppressive systems. Esther's influence was felt beyond the Jewish people and beyond the Persian Empire. Her example became one that people from various backgrounds, nationalities, and faiths could draw strength from. Whether in times of political upheaval, social inequality, or personal crisis, Esther's story has served as a reminder that even in the most uncertain times, it is possible to make a difference. She proved that, even in the face of adversity, the will to do what is right could change the world. In the modern era, Esther's legacy found renewed relevance, particularly in the context of human rights movements. Activists, leaders, and everyday people who fought for justice saw in Esther a symbol of moral leadership and courage. Her ability to challenge an oppressive system, even from within, inspired those who had long fought against corrupt powers, from civil rights movements to global struggles for freedom and equality. For women, Esther became a powerful example of female empowerment. In an era where women's voices were often suppressed or ignored, Esther rose to power and used her influence for the greater good. She showed the world that a woman could possess both beauty and wisdom, and that her strength lay not in her physical appearance, but in her character, leadership, and moral compass. Esther's courage to stand before the king, uninvited, and risk her life for her people became a rallying point for women around the world who fought for their rights, representation, and equality. As the feminist movement gained momentum in the 20th and 21st centuries, Esther's story was invoked time and again by advocates for women's rights, representing the potential for women to rise above the limitations society often imposed on them. She became an icon for women who were challenging the status quo, fighting for equality, and striving to take their rightful places as leaders in both public and private spheres. Esther, the queen who saved her people, became a model for every woman who ever faced adversity and still chose to act bravely for what was right.
Her influence extended to other marginalized groups as well. Esther was a symbol of resistance for anyone oppressed by a powerful regime. Her defiance in the face of an unjust system, her ability to fight for her people even when it meant risking everything, became a beacon for all those who were battling against the tide of societal injustice. Her actions became the embodiment of hope for those who felt powerless or voiceless, reminding them that just like Esther, they too could make a difference, no matter their circumstances. Esther's legacy continued to be honored every year through the celebration of Purim, which became more than just a religious observance for the Jewish people. It became a global celebration of courage, community, and survival. Purim is a time to reflect on Esther's bravery and to remind ourselves that even in the most difficult times, we can find strength in unity and faith. But Purim was also a celebration of something deeper, the collective power of people who stand together against forces of hatred and injustice. Esther's story, of course, didn't end with her victory over Haman. It lived on through the generations, passed down as a testament to what one person, guided by faith and courage, can do in the face of evil. As her story was retold across time, it became a story of hope, a story of how courage can overcome fear, how light can overcome darkness, and how one person can change the fate of an entire nation. In the modern world, Esther is often invoked in times of struggle, whether in the context of social, political, or personal challenges.
Her story continues to provide strength and inspiration for anyone facing insurmountable odds. Her courage speaks to those who stand up for their beliefs, who risk everything for the sake of what is right, and who believe that through determination and faith, they can change the world for the better. Esther's enduring legacy reminds us all that, regardless of who we are or where we come from, we have the potential to shape history. Her story teaches us that true leadership isn't about power or position. It's about courage, faith, and the willingness to act when the world seems to be crumbling. Esther's legacy is an eternal reminder that each of us has the power to bring about change no matter the obstacles and no matter the risks involved. Through her actions, she not only saved her people, but also illuminated the path for generations to come, showing the world that, with courage, one can overcome anything.
As the years turned into decades, and the decades into centuries, Esther's legacy continued to inspire countless generations across cultures, religions, and nations. Her story was no longer just a tale from ancient Persia, but a universal narrative about courage, faith, and the triumph of justice over tyranny. Esther became more than just a figure in the history of the Jewish people. She became a symbol of the unyielding strength of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming oppression. Esther's courage had forever altered the course of history. Her willingness to risk everything, her life, her safety, her position as queen for the survival of her people, became an example for those fighting injustice throughout history. The story of how a young woman, seemingly insignificant in the grand scale of the Persian Empire, rose to power and saved her nation from destruction was a story that resonated not just with Jews, but with anyone who faced adversity or oppression. In times of war, political upheaval, and social change, Esther's example was called upon by those who sought to rise above the systems that sought to keep them oppressed. Her story became a source of strength for those who believed that no matter how small or powerless they felt, they could make a difference. Esther, in her humility and bravery, had shown the world that one individual, guided by faith and morality, could stand against overwhelming odds and change the course of history. For the Jewish people, Esther's story remained a cornerstone of their identity. Purim, the festival celebrating her victory, continued to be a time of joy, remembrance, and reflection. It was more than just a commemoration of their survival. It was a celebration of the strength, unity, and faith that had carried them through the darkest of times. Every year, the story of Esther was read aloud, reminding each new generation of the power of standing up for what is right and the importance of never giving up in the face of danger. Esther became a symbol of resilience, not just for the Jewish people, but for all those who faced oppression. Her actions were celebrated by political movements, particularly in times when those in power sought to crush dissent and maintain unjust systems. Her story was told in courtrooms, classrooms, and protest marches, inspiring individuals and groups to act in the face of injustice, no matter how great the risk. The feminist movement, in particular, found Esther to be an invaluable icon of female strength and leadership. In an era where women were often relegated to the background, Esther's rise to power and her use of that power to protect her people served as a reminder that women too had the ability to lead, to make tough decisions, and to act with unwavering courage. Esther became a beacon for women who were striving to break free from the constraints placed upon them by patriarchal societies. Her story resonated with women who had fought for their rights, for equality, and for a voice in a world that often silenced them. Esther's example showed that being a woman did not limit one's ability to achieve greatness. She was a queen not by birthright alone, but by her actions, her intelligence, and her unwavering dedication to the cause of justice.
Esther became an embodiment of the idea that women could not only shape history, but could do so with compassion, strength, and wisdom. Esther's influence also extended far beyond the realms of gender and religion. Her bravery in the face of political corruption, her defiance against a cruel ruler, and her refusal to allow injustice to reign became a universal symbol of resistance. Whether in the context of racial inequality, political oppression, or social injustice, Esther's story reminded people that they too could stand against the powers that sought to control them. Her actions became a rallying cry for those fighting for justice in all corners of the world. The global significance of Esther's legacy became more apparent as social justice movements grew throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. Esther's courage was invoked during the Civil Rights Movement, when activists in the United States fought for racial equality, during the feminist movement, when women demanded their rightful place in society, and during various struggles for national independence and freedom from colonial powers. Esther was more than just a queen. She was a symbol of the power of the marginalized, a testament to the fact that those who are oppressed have the power to fight back and to bring about change. Esther's story also found a place in modern literature, theater, and film. Her character was brought to life in various adaptations, each exploring different facets of her bravery and wisdom. From books to screenplays, Esther's character became an enduring icon of leadership, resilience, and justice. These adaptations not only brought her story to new audiences, but helped cement her place as one of the most powerful and enduring figures in human history. In the centuries that followed, Esther's legacy continued to be passed down from one generation to the next, whether through the retelling of her story during Purim or through her inclusion in political discourse. Esther became a constant reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right, even when the odds are stacked against you. Her example showed that no matter how small or seemingly insignificant we may feel, we all have the power to change the world.
Her legacy is not confined to a specific time, place, or group of people. Esther's story remains as relevant today as it was in ancient Persia. As long as there are those who fight for justice, for equality, and for the rights of the oppressed, Esther's example will continue to guide and inspire. Her courage, her selflessness, and her unwavering belief in the power of doing what is right are values that transcend time, and her legacy will continue to live on in the hearts of those who seek to bring light to the world just as she did. As the story of Esther has been passed down through the centuries, it has become more than just a historical narrative. It has evolved into a living testament to the power of individual courage, faith, and justice. Esther's impact is not confined to the pages of the Bible or to the celebrations of Purim, but continues to resonate in the hearts of millions of people worldwide. Her legacy remains a guiding light, offering inspiration and strength to all who face adversity, oppression, or the daunting task of standing up for what is right. Esther's actions, which began as a personal act of bravery to save her people, became a universal call to action. Her courage to stand before the king, uninvited, and risk her life to expose Haman's plot was not just an act of heroism, but a profound expression of the belief that one person, when guided by integrity and moral conviction, can make a profound difference. Her story teaches us that the power to change the world lies not in wealth, status, or power, but in the strength of one's character and the courage to act when the world demands it. In the years following her time, Esther became more than just a queen. She became a symbol of hope and resilience. For the Jewish people, her legacy was particularly powerful, as Purim became a celebration not just of their survival, but of the enduring strength that comes from unity and faith. Every year, as the Megillah was read aloud,
Esther's name echoed in synagogues across the world, reminding each generation of the courage that saved their ancestors and of the potential within each of them to make a difference in their own lives and communities. Yet Esther's story is not solely for the Jewish people. Her legacy transcended religious and cultural boundaries, becoming a symbol of resistance for all marginalized groups. In times of political unrest, civil rights movements, and struggles for justice, Esther's name was invoked by those who fought for their rights, their dignity, and their freedom. She became a timeless example of how individuals, no matter how seemingly powerless, can rise against oppressive systems and bring about meaningful change. Throughout the world, Esther was celebrated as a powerful figure of feminine strength. Her rise to the throne was not a mere accident of fate, but the result of her intelligence, grace, and determination. As one of the first and most prominent female leaders to rise to power in an ancient patriarchal society, Esther's story became an inspiration for women striving for equality and leadership roles. Her courage in challenging Haman, a man of immense power, showed that women too could be agents of profound change, and her story continues to inspire women to rise up against injustice, to lead, and to speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves.
But Esther's story was also a beacon for the oppressed, the powerless, and the forgotten. In her, they saw the possibility that they too could fight back against the forces that sought to keep them down. Esther's story became a symbol for anyone facing persecution, whether for their race, religion, gender, or any other reason. She taught that resistance is not only possible, but essential, and that, in the end, righteousness and justice could prevail. Her legacy also permeated the arts and culture, where her story continued to inspire countless works of literature, theater, film, and song. Esther's narrative became a powerful tool for exploring themes of courage, identity, and resistance. Through these adaptations, Esther's name reached new audiences, and her story was brought to life in ways that kept her memory alive and meaningful across generations. Even today, Esther's legacy continues to shape the conversations about justice, equality, and human rights. Her name is invoked by those working to create a world where everyone has the opportunity to live in freedom and dignity. Her story remains a reminder that, in a world that often seems rife with inequality and suffering, there is always hope. Esther's life showed that even in the darkest moments, one person's actions, rooted in courage, faith, and an unwavering belief in what is right, can change the fate of many. In a time when global challenges such as inequality, violence, and oppression persist, Esther's example offers a guide for action. Whether in personal struggles or in the face of systemic injustice, her story encourages each of us to act when we see wrongdoing, to stand up for those who cannot speak for themselves, and to believe that, despite the odds, change is possible. Esther's legacy calls upon us to rise to our own potential, just as she did, and to never underestimate the power of one individual to make a lasting impact on the world. The strength of Esther's character, the courage, wisdom, and selflessness that defined her actions reminds us that we too have the ability to rise above fear and doubt, to stand firm for justice, and to change the course of history. As long as there is injustice in the world, Esther's legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. Her story will always be a beacon of hope, a reminder that courage and compassion can overcome even the most difficult of challenges, and that through faith and action, we have the power to make the world a better place. And so, as we remember Esther, her courage, her wisdom, and her profound impact on the world,
we honor her not just as a queen who saved her people, but as a symbol of the enduring power of justice, faith, and moral leadership. Her legacy lives on, lighting the way for all those who seek to stand for what is right, to lead with compassion, and to bring change to the world. Did you like the video? Don't forget to leave your like and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any exciting stories, and activate the bell to receive notifications firsthand. And we want to know your opinion. Comment below what you thought of this video and share your thoughts with us. Let's be part of this journey of faith and learning together.